So it's being ready for live. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, dear Facebook world. I'm Muhammad Ghulam Mustafa from Suprabhat, Sydney, and we are from Sydney, Australia. So Suprabhat Sydney is the famous newspaper, and Suprabhat TV as well we have started for broadcasting our so important social issue. So we are broadcasting it's long time, and Suprabhat Sydney is publishing last 10 years in Sydney in our Bengali community. We try to publish the important news which is published from the Australian government and what's happening in our community for developing and getting informed of our community. So we are publishing every news and everything on our newspaper. And this platform, Suprabhat Sydney Live, we request our guest every now and then. So it's not in like that every week or every month, but in different time we request our guest here because of we try to inform to our people according to the knowledge. We know that knowledge is the power. Knowledge makes everything, and knowledge transforming each other from starting our life to till now. That's why we are in the modern age. So our famous guests, always we request them coming to us and they discuss about the new and important topics, which one will be benefited for our community and for the human being. So today we invited our honorable guest. The guest also before time was invited and presented one very important topic with us. So I just make you introduce with him, our guest. So the prominent guest is Dr. Jan Ali, senior lecturer in Islam and modernity. Dr. Jan Ali is a religious sociologist specializing in Islam. He holds a joint appointment as a senior lecturer in Islam and modernity in the School of Humanities and Communication Arts and the Community and Research Analyst in the Religion and Society Research Center at the Western Sydney University. He has also finished his master's and PhD degree from the University of New South Wales. So Dr. Jan discussed before with us in our studio about his prominent research book, Islam and Muslim in Australia, Settlement, Integration, Sharia, Education, and Terrorism. He also published different kinds of, published in different places as like New Delhi, Oxford University Press has published his another book, Islam in the West. And another books also published, it's also prominent book, Islamic Revivalism Encounters the Modern World, a study of the Tabligh Jamaat. So he is researching on the Islam. He has researched another new things we are going to discuss today about the organ transplantation. So it's also very important and popular issue in the world, which are sometimes it's solved or sometimes not solving the issue. So he researched long time about this one. It has the 4 parts. So we will broadcast this one within the 4 days, 4 different times. We will inform you whenever will be our second session with Dr. Jan. So welcome, Mr. Jan. Assalamu alaikum. How are you today?
Wa alaikum assalam. I'm very well. Thank you very much, Muhammad, for inviting me. And thank you very much for Suprabhat Sydney for having me give a presentation today on organ transplantation. I'm very well. How are you, Brother Muhammad?
Alhamdulillah. I am also say you cordially thank you from Suprabhat Sydney and from me especially and from our Bengali community that you are giving your most valuable time for us. I know especially our community people, they will be very much benefited to see the current research, getting the knowledge from you. So today we just talked before with you that we are going to discuss about your new research on the organ transplantation.
Yep.
We know that organ transplantation, we can say that actually it is very beneficial for the human being for transforming this one. But according to the Islam, our different scholars give the different opinion in the different time. As like our from India, some of the scholars from Western countries, some of the scholars, they are giving different times in the different opinion there that is it we can do or not. So according to your research, we would like to know, please tell us actually what is organ transplantation, why we need to do it, and according to your 4-part, I request you the first part you will discuss for us. So I say again, thank you for joining with us, and you can start to talk for our audience.
Thank you very much, Brother Muhammad. Okay, I'll start sharing my, okay. So today I will start with my presentation on organ transplantation in Islam. And my presentation actually is divided into 4 parts. And part 1, which is introduction, definition, and history. Part 2 is permissibility perspective of organ transplantation in Islam. Part 3 will be on impermissibility perspective on organ transplantation in Islam. And in part 4, I will discuss the analysis of this. Today, I will be focusing on part 1, introduction, definition, and history, as a way of bit of a background to a more detailed discussion that will follow, inshallah, next week around this time, if that is okay with Brother Muhammad and Supravat, inshallah. So that is the approach for today's talk, introduction, definition, and history of organ transplantation. Now, to start the conversation, as Brother Muhammad mentioned, that the scholars are divided on this issue, and that is very true. That's why I have 2 parts, part 2 and part 3 here, where some scholars say it's permissible and some scholars say it's not, and some of the reasonings behind their position on the issue. A few points to start with. One is that organ transplantation as a medical procedure is a very complex process, and medical practitioners from Islamic faith as well as non-Islamic faith do engage in organ transplantation process. So it's not only non-Muslims engage in this process as professionals and experts, but Muslims as well. And so the question then emerges, if Muslims are involved in this process, is it permissible? Is organ transplantation permissible? Now, it is not a very simple answer, yes or no. You will read in the literature on organ transplantation in Islam, and you might find various scholars who say that majority people from Islamic faith accept organ transplantation, and therefore they make the assertion that organ transplantation is permissible in Islam. So you might see in the flyers on organ transplantation, you might find in certain journals, in certain book chapters, in certain books, where the author might make the assertion that organ transplantation is permissible in Islam. Now, that is very deceiving. That is not really true. in the sense that there are two prominent positions on the issue. And I want to actually educate the audience by explaining to the audience that there are two very concrete, very solid perspectives. And when we make our decision, we need to make our decision based on information before us. So we need to make an informed decision rather than simply choosing one perspective in absence of the other. We need to have both perspectives before us, and then we can make a decision whether, yes, it is permissible and I'm supporting that, or no, it's not permissible and I'm not supporting that. So if we look at the history of organ transplantation, or actually, if we look at organ transplantation today, I suppose, you will find that the West has become the leader in this medical field, in the field of organ transplantation, making a great progress in disease control, disease management, and of course, cure of disease through a variety of medical means, and also performing surgical procedures, including organ transplantation, the topic for this presentation. Organ transplantation is, for the first time in human history, taking place on a mass scale. When I say mass scale, what I mean is that large number of people are receiving working organs from people donating them, and it's happening. For instance, heart transplantation is taking place on a large scale. Kidney transplantation, pancreas transplantation, so forth and so on large scale. It's not that it happens in one instance in Australia, another instance in UK. When I say on mass scale, many people are receiving organ transplantation here in Australia as they are receiving in other parts of the world at the same time. It is a medical procedure, organ transplantation, and it is always undertaken by experts or a team of experts who specialize in organ transplantation and who actually gain knowledge and set of skills to remove a failing or a diseased organ or organs, sometimes multiple organs, from the human body and replace it, or them, meaning one organ or many, more than one, with a functioning organ in the or organs in the body. And it is important to remember that some individuals who suffer from illness may require more than just one organ transplantation. So they might, for instance, need a kidney transplantation as well as a heart transplantation same time. So in that case, you are looking at a multiple organ transplantation taking place in one single human body. And that process obviously makes the entire surgical procedure very complicated, and organs received by the recipient might not necessarily be from one single donor. It could be, the kidney could be from one particular individual and the heart could be from another. In terms of my work, the sociological and anthropological study of this phenomenon of organ transplantation, particularly in the context of Islam, is an area where research is really done. And so you will not find much evidence and much literature and research in this area, particularly from anthropological and sociological perspectives. And these two perspectives are very important because they provide a much wider insight into organ transplantation rather than simply a theological or a medical perspective. In terms of organ transplantation for Muslims, the Quran and Sunnah and the Sharia collectively doesn't address the issue of organ transplantation. So the Quran is silent, the Sunnah or Hadith is silent, and the Sharia is silent. And so how do we know that organ transplantation is permissible or not permissible, particularly for Muslims? This is where it gets complicated because the two great texts of Islam are silent on the issue, and Sharia, the two main sources of Sharia, are Quran and Hadith. So how do scholars determine in favor or against organ transplantation? And this is where I will explain in some detail in the next two parts of my presentation. So bear with me, but I want to highlight today that there are ways through which scholars use Quran and Hadith and the sources or other sources of Sharia, other human sources of Sharia, such as qiyas, which in English means analogy, and ijma, which in English means scholarly consensus, and ijtihad, which means scholarly or individual reasoning. And so the fuqaha, the muftis, and the ulama use particularly the Sunnah and the other three sources of Sharia to arrive at a decision whether organ transplantation is permissible or not. And so we will look at that in some detail, inshallah, next week. And as Brother Muhammad introduced the topic, he mentioned this point that different scholars have got different perspectives on this issue. So currently, globally speaking, and even in Australia, for instance, or for that matter, a Muslim majority countries such as Indonesia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Egypt, the scholars are divided on the issue, whether we're talking about Muslim scholars in the West or Muslim scholars in Muslim majority countries. There is no general consensus that exists among Muslim scholars and Muslim jurists who actually say that organ transplantation is permissible or not permissible. The position is that some say it's permissible and some say it's not. So the opinions, as I mentioned, are divided on this issue. And generally speaking, there are two positions on the question of organ transplantation in Islam. Is it permissible or not? And so one position among the scholars is that, yes, it's permissible. So I will be talking about the permissibility perspective, inshallah, next week. And some scholars say that it is not permissible, and I will talk about that in a week after, inshallah, with my presentation on impermissibility perspective on organ transplantation. And there are some scholars in the middle who say, yes, it is permissible but this way, but not that particular way. So for instance, some scholars say that organ transplantation is permissible as long as it is not as long as the organs that's going to be transplanted are not from individuals whose organ, by taking them out, will actually kill them. In other words, if there's an accident, for example, and someone is in a bad condition, some scholars say you can't take their heart out or their liver out and transplant it in someone who really needs it, because you will be killing that person, and that is not permissible. Some say it is permissible as long as it is from a person where he or she can still survive without having one of the organs, if the organs operate in pairs. So for example, kidney. Every human individual born is born with 2 kidneys. And so if someone needs a kidney, a person can donate his or her kidney to the recipient, and some scholars say that's okay. But then again, those who say it's not permissible, they would say it's not permissible at all. So there are scholars on one side saying it's permissible. On the other side, another group of scholars saying it's not permissible, and there are some in the middle. But the middle are a minority, and so I'm not going to talk about them in my presentation. I'm going to talk about those from 2 main perspectives. So what is organ transplantation? There's a definition here, and I will read it out for you. It is by ÿß· who provides a very good definition. And he says that by transplantation, we understand the complete or partial separation of a piece of tissue, or of a part of an organ, or of a whole body from its normal connection and its transfer to a different place, either in the same individual, that is called autotransplantation, or in a closely related individual, synergio transplantation, or into another not directly related individual of the same species, homeotransplantation, or into an individual belonging to a different species or class of animals, heterotransplantation in the wider sense. The joining together of 2 organisms also may be considered as transplantation. So, for instance, liver with liver. So, in terms of organ transplantation, there is we have different types of transplantation that experts can provide. And as I mentioned in my definition, that ÿß· provides those definitions, that definition to explain what exactly happens when transplantation takes place. When transplantation takes place, it can take place, if you like, by what is called autografting. And autografting as a form of organ transplantation, a technique, is a some scholars say it's a historic phenomenon, but it happens in modern times quite extensively. And so what we have is, in modern surgical procedures in relation to organ transplantation to cure disease and prolong life, 3 types of organ transplantation are practiced in modern medicine: autografting or autotransplantation, allografting or allotransplantation, and xenografting or xenotransplantation. So these are 3 main types of transplantation that takes place in modern medicine. And let me share my screen again. So when it comes to organ transplantation, is it a modern phenomenon? The question arises, is it a modern phenomenon, or is it something that has been happening in human history for centuries, for millennia? Well, if you look at the history on organ transplantation, you will find that Indian medical practitioners used to engage in organ transplantation centuries ago. And there are some written evidence about that. But in terms of organ transplantation, where an organ is moved from one individual to another, it was not until around the middle of last century, in 1950s, that organ transplantation started to take place and started to happen on a, if you like, on a somewhat regular basis with greater success. So you will find, according to historical evidence, that the success of organ transplantation, where surgeons were able to transplant organs successfully, was from around 1950s, and it was from one person to another. So person to person. Before this, human-to-human organ transplantation or grafting was perceived as impossible. So prior to 1950s, human-to-human organ transplantation was seen in medical profession as something that is not possible. And obviously that was being, if you like, proven wrong by medical professionals later on. I just want to make a few points about the history. Let me get my notes. So just to elaborate a bit more, in terms of the 3 types of organ transplantation I mentioned. So autograft or autotransplantation is when surgical procedures take place within an organ or a tissue, or sometimes both, from one part of the body is transplanted to another part. So let's say, for example, a particular vein is taken from, say, the leg and put into an arm or something like that. So that is called auto transplantation. And the allograft or allotransplantation is a transplantation procedure involving removal or transplantation of organs or tissues or cells from a genetically non-identical donor of the same species, so human beings to human beings, to a recipient. So for example, a heart from one individual to another individual, obviously from the donor to the recipient. Now, some organs that needs to be transplanted, I'm not a medical expert, so I don't want to preempt my session here, but some organs need to be transplanted whilst the individual is still alive, and some can be taken when the individual has passed away. How this works is a medical question. I'm afraid I can't answer that, but I just want to make that point. Most human organ and tissue transplantation in modern medicine actually takes place as allograft transplantation, but xenograft or xenotransplantation is a surgical procedure where organs are removed from one living species to another. So say, for example, a heart valve from, let's say, a sheep to a human body. So what we have here is autograft or autotransplantation. We have got allograft or allotransplantation, and we have got xenotransplantation, xenograft or xenotransplantation. So in going back to the history issue, as I mentioned earlier, that before 1950s, organ transplantation did take place in human history. And I mentioned about India. So you will find that in Indian text, the Sanskrit text on medicine and surgery, which is called Susruta Sanhita. That was in 600 BC or around 600 BC. And you'll find evidence in that text where organ transplantation took place under the surgical expertise of Indian surgeons. Now, were those transplantations taking place in the similar manner or same manner as they are taking place today? That is not very clear, but it is only logical to assume that they would be using different processes and wouldn't have the technological resources to perform transplantation that experts can do today, the surgeons can do today. And that's why the difference between them and now is that we can do on large scale transplantation on large scale because of technological advancements and availability. In terms of Islam, I just want to share my screen. So, was there any transplantation that took place in in early Islamic history that we can say or use that as a basis to develop a perspective that says that, yeah, organ transplantation is permissible? Well, you will see that there is some evidence, but we have to be very careful how we read this. It has been reported that during the prophetic career of Prophet Muhammad from 1950 to 1930, from 570 to 632, a companion of Prophet Muhammad known as Qadata ibn Numan damaged his eye in the Battle of Uhud, and Prophet Muhammad actually replanted it, which according to the evidence functioned better than the normal eye. And you'll find this quote in Hawa, who actually cites this example. But just be mindful of this as evidence of organ transplantation. As you can see that Prophet Muhammad simply replanted the eye rather than removed it from a particular person and transplanted it into Qadata ibn Numan, or that it was something that took place in terms of, if you like, eye from another animal, or another species. So it was basically a replanted. One could say that it was very much a transplantation, or basically putting it back into where it belonged. So does that constitute a transplantation? It raises a question around that. In another instance, it has been related that in the Battle of Badr, Prophet Muhammad, again, the term used here is replaced the damaged arm of Mu'awath bin Afra and the impaired hand of Habib bin Yasaf. So there are two cases here that we can see where transplantation or replacement of organs took place in the case of the arm of Mu'awath bin Afra and the impaired or damaged hand of Habib bin Yasaf. In his book Mughni al-Muqtaj actually quite extensively talks about or discusses organ transplantation and about this practice in early Muslim surgeons in terms of autografting, allografting, and xenografting. So in order to if you like, in order to develop a discussion around the question of whether organ transplantation is permissible in Islam or is not permissible in Islam, we can see, as I tried to demonstrate in my discussion today, that historical evidence, both in the case of Prophet Muhammad's experience or during his time, there is some evidence of organs being replaced or put back, such as the eye of the companion of one of Prophet Muhammad's companions, and if we go even further back in a non-Muslim context, in Indian context, 600 BC, as far back as 600 BC, you can see in the Sanskrit text where the evidence demonstrates that surgeons did practice organ transplantation. Now, so that is, if you like, the background of organ transplantation that we can see taking place in history, human history. In my next two presentations, I will go in detail and talk about one perspective, which is permissibility perspective, and see how scholars actually justify the permissibility of organ transplantation in Islam. And then following week, I will look at the evidence provided by scholars who actually argue against organ transplantation. And then we'll have a analysis in the final week around this organ transplantation. So I hope that I have provided you some background to organ transplantation and some insights and helped you think about this question of organ transplantation and see with the evidence in the following 2 weeks, which way would you like to go? I don't want you to make your mind just as yet, but listen to or read the evidence before you make that decision, which is very important. So I will stop there, Brother Muhammad. I hope I have provided some insights into this question of organ transplantation, or provided a bit of a background to a more robust and more detailed discussion, which I will try to do in the following number of weeks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jan. You have discussed a very important and very deeply topic, but very easy way with the easy language. So many medical term also was included there. It's like autografting, allografting, xenografting. And we have known everything, the history of transplantation, introduction, and 3 types of transplantation. I mean, in details, we have learned about these 2 days on your research, on your lecture. So I hope that when our audience, you will be there next another three parts, so including today's totally 4 parts. So it will be very, very helpful. I try to also research in Google and YouTube and getting some of the knowledge about this one. Actually, there is not that much knowledge about this issue, but others issue we can get so much knowledge in everywhere. But I think it's very essential now, because in modern science, medical science, it's very improved now day by day, and they try to do it very easily. They can do it very easily, and it's also very helpful. But in our Muslim, we always see that it's divided into 2 parts. One part says yes, another part says it's no. And this research will be very helpful for the Muslim community in the whole over the world and for the next generation as well. So thank you all audience who are staying with me. We hope that next 3 sessions also will join with us. And this video you will find in our YouTube channel as well in the long run for your research and for your study and for learning the knowledge. Thank you again for joining with us, Dr. Jan. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Brother Muhammad. Thank you so much.